Welcome back, folks. Another episode of Nationalism, the Italian Unification, and the road towards the First World War. The origins of the First World War. Johnny the Historian here, and we're going to hop right into this. We're talking about Italy. It's a perfect time because the Winter Olympics is in Italy. It's awesome, okay? We're going to talk about how this country actually formed to have the ability today to actually host the Winter Olympics. Remember the Winter Olympics in Turin? Well, there you go. Another sponsor in the North, right? Well, all the North was split into two. You had independent Sardinia Paramount, and then you had Lombardy and other regions, okay? We're going to get into that, all right? So, Mussolini, we talking about Mussolini, not Mussolini, okay? Okay, Mussolini. So we're going to learn about pretty much the foundations of pretty much after we left off, is after the treaty was signed with the Austrians in the First War of Italian Unification in August 1849. Okay? Well, by this point, Victor Emmanuel II, King of Sardinia and Paramount, with his trusted Prime Minister, Cavour, worked to build the economy. Now, 100% Emmanuel II, King Emmanuel II, was on board for Italian unification. He was part of that nationalistic spirit. At the same time, he had a personal vendetta about it too, right? You got to think about it. Hey, I want to be the first to unify this country. I'm going to be part of this. It's going to be the Kingdom of Italy. Ooh, if I only had... See, I love history so much, personally on a level, that even if it was a gay man, I would probably have to receive on this one, okay? So I'm going to tell you one thing. Oh, I love history. I love how this all plays out, okay? Bear with me. Hopefully you get able to follow along. I'm not saying you're stupid. Here's the modern world. Well, you don't think I can't follow along? You know how many times that I was like in the situation, you don't think I can't follow along? And at the end of it, you're like, you did it all wrong, but you were confused and you didn't understand it. Man up, be a man, be a human being, and be like, hey, need a little bit more clarification, give a comment below. Alright? If you don't, well, it's not my problem. Alright? So, now, they worked together to build a strong economy. They realized after the First War of Independence against the Austrians, and then plus the Roman siege that happened in Rome to bring back Pope Pius and the papacy states with the French after that successful month siege of Rome. This was not like in 1476 BC or 1476 BC, like, wait, what, right? With the fall of the Roman Empire and besieged by the Ostrogoths. And the Vandals, they did their thing too, right? Back in ancient Rome. But Rome, again, was sieged in modern times. And it was sieged by the French. Remember, it was 10,000. And by General Nicholas. So, Nicoze. Okay, some people would like to say, I don't know why. But anyway, I'll have fun with it, okay? Now, they constructed and they created an army. Not on the vabber of, remember, nationalism is patriotism on steroids. Well, they're going to jack it up. They're going on a roid rage here, okay? Keep that in mind in nationalism. So, what the Kingdom of Sardinia actually does, Cavour and the king themselves start to introduce policies and procedures in a lot of senses. They start to establish their kingdom. Now, I had to find a book, but with a pretty interesting map in it. Now, if you can see this map, this is Sardinia. Alright? All this green is pretty much controlled by Austria. There's the Papal States. Here's the independent kingdom of the two Sicilies. Okay? And plus there's a lot of other little small duchies and city-states within that map, which they could show because the map is a little small. Now, I had a bigger map in a book, but that's the only one I could find on short notice. So, alright? And that's about the Italian unification. And here's the two guys Right there, look at them. That's some sexy stuff right there. Look at that. That right there is a man. You can't go, right? Black and white. That was Kavar in the first side as Prime Minister in the colored picture, and then you got Garibaldi in the other picture. But anyways, I wish I could just put it on the screen. But anyway, we're not getting into that. So they constructed railways. All right, what the French, when they occupied during the Napoleonic Age, started it. Well, they expanded it by this point in their region. They're establishing infrastructure, transportational infrastructure, even governmental infrastructure, military infrastructure. There's a lot of things here. And they want to secure a strong, vibrant economy to have a secure, steady state finances situation, okay? Or get into that, right? They wanted a strong economy. They wanted a treasury to based upon to support such infrastructures that needed for a nation, but for what they needed to do to make this national dream of a foreign-free, unified Italian state. Okay. Now, to get all the other 7, 8 states, major states, and numerous principalities back into order. Okay. So now they develop a lot of this. They improve agriculture within the region, which actually boosts their economy, and they got to feed their army. The citizens of Sardinia, the Kingdom of Sardinia at this time, you see how small it was, right? Stuck up in the corner, the western corner of Italy, right, today. And this little country is almost, in a sense, the David and the Goliath story, because they became powerful. They had a well-equipped, well-trained, well-nationalistic military. The soldiers weren't, feminism, patriotism. They were like, ooh, nationalism, we are going to win. They were just, ooh, do you get it? Yeah, you ever step into a Slim Jim, right? They're all WWE. They ain't this, Pony Express down the road at the gay bar fight. So they were just going all out. Okay? Patriotism, too weak, not enough. It's honorable, it's respectable, but it ain't enough to fulfill these dreams. Nationalism, going on a roid rage here, boys. Now, their military becomes very good. Their economy becomes very strong, despite being a small nation. And, and they have a lot of commerce in this. So, now, by the middle of the 1850s, they established all these. And Sardinia is becoming a very powerful state. And a very powerful state indeed. Now, the thing is, what's the second factors? That was the number one factor to create a strong military, a nationalistic military, and economy, things to build a nation. So the Kingdom of Sardinia had to be the stepping stone. They had to be the example of what Italy is going to become, or what the Italian state can become. So this is the great thing about this, okay? So they become right through this. Now, I love this part, because it's going to take some interesting event to happen. The second major factor is important, powerful allies. Well, they ain't going to go to the Austrians. They can't really go to the other Italian city-states, because that's just, you think it would logically make sense, but they weren't on board. Their governments and their representative assemblies and their kings weren't really, and definitely the Pope, wasn't really on board of a unified Italian peninsula. That means they're going to lose their power. They're going to lose their kingdom. They're going to lose their lands. All right, they're going to lose their image. All right, everything they worked for, what they want to uphold and to held for the rest of their lives, they're going to lose it. Here's the great thing about, I would say great thing, but this is the thing about it. By the middle of the 1850s, all right, Sardinia, something happens. What happens in 1853 to 1856? Now, as a Russian historian, this is huge, all right? This is the Crimea War. This happens way over in Eastern Europe, right on the Russian lands of the Crimea and southern Russia. This war is taking place. Now, if you ever known the war, there's one One of these is not like the other. All right? You had Austria, Prussia, you had France, well, basically not Prussia, but you had France and Britain and the Hungarian, well, yeah, the Austrian Empire, as well as the Ottoman Empire. But then you have one of the major fates, the Kingdom of Sardinia. Well, that's odd. That's like putting a gay man in a straight festival. He's going to stick it like a sore thumb. Or you take a straight man dressed in cowboy and like look like Chuck Norris, you stick him in a gay bar, he's going to stick it like a sore thumb. That's what it should recognize, because one of these is not like the other. Why in the world, you have to ask yourself, when I came across this for my time in history, why is Sardinia? First time I came across and read about the Crimean War. My first book of the Crimean War was called A Brief History of the Crimean War. And I read it, and I was like, why is Sardinia? It kind of mentioned it, why, but not really why. Why is Sardinia in this? They're not a superpower. They're not a colonial power like France or Britain. They're not a real massive player on the European stage like Austria and the Ottoman Empire. Despite the Ottoman Empire was in a weak state, but they had to preserve, okay, and stop Russian aggression and stop the dissolution and fall of the Ottoman Empire to push the Russians back. Now, those 3 years for brother, you have the Charge of the Light Brigade, which is notorious, but we're not getting in the Crimean War, which I would love to right now. For Russia and for Europe and even for the world, the Crimean War is one of the most pinnacle wars that you have to discuss, because it's a foreshadowing of what's to come, and in a lot of aspects of what will happen, what it revealed, everything at the time. So, by this time, Sardinia allies themselves with Britain and France. Despite the French occupation entirely of the Italian peninsula, they thought, well, what's the lesser of two evils, the French or the Austrians? Well, they were all allied in the Crimean War by 1853. Okay, the Crimean War ends in 1856. Okay. Now, you got to ask yourself this, what was the Sardinian and Russian relations? There was not a whole lot of relations. Russia didn't even know about the Kingdom of Sardinia. It was just like a blip on the map. They heard it and they're like, nah, whatever, right? Now, you have to ask yourself the relations with this. Because Russia, now knowing, being a Russian historian, the relationships, what I do know with foreign policy, which I love to study, as you know, and in international affairs, is basically there's not really much existence between the two. They're very oblivious to each other. Now, Sardinia had nothing against Russia. There's not even a puff of wind. Nothing. Right? It was like Brazil went to war with, in 1850, Brazil decided to go, or Canada was like, I'm going to declare a war on Vietnam. No reason whatsoever, right? So it doesn't make sense. So you had to go, when I was a historian, you had to look and be like, okay, why? There's always eternal motives. Now, there's not such thing as selfishness on this planet, because there's always a motive. I help you, you help me. So we're both selfish. But at the same time, I'm helping you, you're helping me. So it's kind of like, here's the bad, here's the good. Every reaction has a positive and negative reaction. Well, Sardinia decides to join the Allied side in this war. Now, this is going to be interesting for Sardinia, because this is interesting in a lot of aspects to the achievement of the Italian Unification and the identity of Italy today, because this is their first, especially for Sardinia, this is a major war. This is one of the major wars of European history at the time, is the Crimean War. So, the kingdom, after the war and after 1856, Sardinia actually did perform pretty well on the battlefield. Yeah, my girl. Alright? Very well on the battlefield, and actually gained a lot of prestige and honor and respect as a nation. Like, well, this is a small kingdom, but hey, they got some might. They're a little bit of a David in there against that Goliath, all right? Against that Russian Goliath of a bear, right? So they won on the battlefield, and they gained a high level of political position because of it too, even on the European stage. It's amazing. Small geographical location of the Kingdom of Sardinia, which had a great economy, a great military, and it performed well on the battlefield. All right, within the Crimean War. And now, when the Treaty of Paris was signed, which that ended the Crimean War in 1856. It was the Treaty of Paris, okay? After that war. Sardinia sat at the table, at the victor's table. Like, yeah, holy frank. I'm like, if you were these guys, you're like, that's France. That's Britain, the greatest empire in the world and the master of the seas. That's Austria. Ugh. You know what I mean? Ugh. French, yeah, okay, well, we're worked out. But here's the thing. This sets the stage for the origins of the First World War, all right? Okay, keep in mind this stuff, all right? Now, one of the things, like... Now, one of the greatest quotes, and I can't quite remember, but I believe it was Cavour that actually said this. I never discovered the art of deceiving diplomats. I tell them the truth, and they never believe me. End quote. It's one of my interesting, because this is what Sardinia actually does. You can tell the truth and like, nah, that's not the reason. How many times in your own life you told the truth and no one believed you? Well, this is where you go to the part where you only know the truth between yourself and the Almighty. That's all that matters. Okay? So, it's pretty much all that matters. Now, by 1858, what are you doing there, cat? By 1858, Cavour signed a treaty with the French Empire. Now, at the time, during the Crimean War and everything like this, it's Emperor Napoleon III. Okay? Keep that in mind. He is the Emperor of France. Now, the terms of this treaty was pretty simple. The problem is the French and the Austrians were part of that whole alliance system against the Russian Empire during the Crimean War. So it's going to get a little bit tricky. Now, for Napoleon, well, we're going to see what we can do here, you know? Now, the treaty where Austria threatened Sardinia, okay, the French would step in to help, to drive the Austrians out of northern Italy, all right? In exchange, this was offered. In exchange, this is why it's important. I want to look at the map here. Okay, in exchange of Solvay and Nice, or Nice, if you want to put it in English, but Nice, and some more. Those two areas there, you probably can't see it, but these two small territories that were actually a part of the Kingdom of Sardinia, France wanted them. And in exchange for that help, we'll give you those two territories, because we're going to have all of Italy. Pretty small price. I'll give you 2 pieces of bread, for that way I'll just give you the bun, and I'll have to take the whole meat of that sauce. Right? You know, I'm just going to give you two pieces of bread for an entire loaf. Absolutely. Great deal. It was a great deal. All right? Now, it was a verbal pact. It wasn't really down on concrete, but it was. And it was an interesting verbal agreement. All right? The official treaty wasn't really signed until 1859 with the Franco-Sardinian Treaty, which was then officially signed. But they got the ball rolling, and they finally, after a while, Napoleon III, and as much as King Victor Emmanuel II, knew we're going to have to put this on paper. So they do sign a treaty the following year in 1859. All right? Now, this sets the stage for the Second Italian War of Independence. All right? And this takes place, and this fires off in 1859, because Sardinia knows it's like, hey, I got France behind me. What are you going to do, Austrians? Come on. Now, this is going to kind of mimic like the Serbians in the when the First World War starts out, which we're getting there, right? It's like, yeah, come on, Assyria. Or, yeah, come on, Austria. Sorry, Syria. Come on, Assyria. Yeah, we'll say Syria. Right? Come on, Austrians. Yeah, we got the big mother brother of Russia behind us. So, you have this throughout the course of human history where you have a smaller guy, but realistically, the Sardinians were a powerful force, but nothing that could go up against the entire Austrian Empire. They already showed that in the First War of Independence, right? They were a lot better. They got a lot of prestige and everything off. Man, cats get into everything. Dodged the bullet there. Life moment, right? Caught on tape. But anyway, it's not America's Fun's what it is. But anyway, whatever. Now, the Second War of Italian Unification, or the Second War of Italian Independence, it also was called, was a very crucial conflict. All right, it was like the Crimean War on the European stage. But this war was crucial for Italian unification at this process. Now, where the Kingdom of Sardinia allied with France, it had the backing of the big shooter in the back, right? So it's like, hey, cheers to that, boys. We got a treaty signed. We got the big boy. Let's take on the other big boy, the Austrians. Now, the French and the Austrians didn't really get along. They never really had any beef with each other in a lot of aspects at this time. They never really had any beef. Remember, France is a colonial empire. The Austrians are a landlocked empire that expands at the cost of European nations in Central Eastern Europe. They're not even similar. With empire building, right? So, what takes place is the Italians don't declare war. The Austrians do. This is the brilliance of this. The Austrians find about this war, about this treaty, they get a little nervous. They get really nervous. They're like, we got to get in there. Okay? We got to get in there. But at the same time, after the Crimean War, the prestige and the honor and the military might and power of Sardinia really threatened Austrian supremacy in northern Italy. Well, for the Austrians, they're the ones that jumped the gun. They declare war. This starts off the Second Italian War of Independence. They declare war. The Sardinia and the King, the Italians don't. They just, by their actions and what they're doing, provoke the Austrians to declare war first. It's awesome at this. It's like, no. We're going to war here. We're going to war, okay? So on April the 26th, 1849, very important date, the Austrians declare war right on Sardinia, or the Kingdom of Sardinia. And this is huge, because that means, because the agreement that was signed, when was this signed? Officially? Anybody know? Same year, 1859. French have to back up the Sardinians, the Kingdom of Sardinia, okay? So they liberate. So France helps. They fight the Austrians to liberate northern Italy that was allied with France. Now, this was crucial in a lot of aspects. Now, this was after April the 26th, 1859, right? The official declaration of it. All right? Now, Sardinia is like, oh, we're at war with the Austrians, okay? So they mobilize their army. They refuse an ultimatum that is set forth by the Austrians. Huh. This is going to mimic something. So, the Austrians give them an ultimatum. This is notorious for the Austrians to do. They give them an ultimatum. Well, to demobilize your armies. Alright? You don't need them. They are a threat to our influence, our sphere of influence in the or in northern Italy. No. Refused everything on that ultimatum, especially to demobilize and to demilitarize their military and their kingdom, no go. They were like big middle fingers to the Austrians because they knew they had France behind their back. So, and plus, it would kind of defeat the purpose of the Italian-Austrian, or the Italian unification process now, wouldn't it? And oh, it did. Oh, it did. Okay? So, the Second Italian War of Independence starts. Now, here's the kicker, and this is what I love about it, because you don't know where it's going to be. It kind of is a small, mimical image of what is to come, and it's pretty cool. Now, because leading into the French intervention and led to a lot of major Austrian defeats, okay? At one time, you got to remember the Sardinians and the Austrians were fighting almost in the same vicinity of each other in the Crimean War. So the soldiers themselves got a feel for the other. But this is what I love too, all right? This is what I love too. Now, there's quite a few battles that actually take place, all right? But we'll get into those. But with French help, the French and Sardinia defeat the Austrians on the battlefield. All right? Yeah, remember that first one? Didn't go so good. No. Not this time, okay? But here's the problem, okay? Now, they forced Austria to cede the region of Lombardy, right? Which is pretty much right here, right beside Sardinia, right in the middle. I don't know if you can see that. It sucks. I'm sorry, okay? But bring up a map, too, right? Now, the thing is, you see their neighbors. So, one of the northern Italian states, which is under Austrian rule. They seceded. But here's the thing. France signs a different truce and agreement with the Austrians. Now, this is a huge surprise. This surprises Cavour on a massive scale. All right? The Prime Minister, the Sardinian Prime Minister. All right? They put forth a separate truce. All right? Now, this would seem like it would have felt like an act of betrayal. Right? It kind of is. The Allies, what? You signed a different truce with the Austrians? What kind of this? This ain't like what it was after the Crimean War with the Treaty of Paris. That's what we want here. This whole war, we're all involved. One solid sit down. We're going to talk about it. No. This didn't happen. Okay, over that. Anyway, so now there's Lombardy and Venetia. So Sardinia got Lombardy, but Venetia was still under the hands of the Austrians, and this was part of this entire betrayal. All right, because they kept going, but France throws down their arms. Now, why would France do that? Why do you think France would do that? Well, they didn't want to go to war with the Austrians, and they didn't want to piss off anybody else, and the Pope too. But something else came up. We're going to get into that. And the reason why France steps out of this. So, it's interesting enough as it goes, okay? So, now, so this got the Italians thrown right off guard. They didn't expect this. This was unexpected. But there's an unseen bonus that comes out of this. Because after this happens, United Provinces of Central Italy start to form together. And then by 1860, they join as one unit, as the main kingdom is going to be Sardinia. All right? This is going to happen again in Italy, or in the German unification, when Prussia becomes the central state to unify Germany, while Sardinia becomes the central state to unify the entire Italian peninsula. All right? So they all agree to join and follow King Victor Emmanuel II. Right? So this all happens. This was the unsurprising thing. Well, you take the good with the bad. This is what this is. This is exactly what this is. Now, Garibaldi shows up at this time. Okay? Now, because of all this, he shows up, And he's basically at the time where, okay, he's going to go on his expedition of the 1,000 at this point. All right. France accepts and approves the enlargement in the treaty, and Napoleon III sponsors this. So, this agreement between the central states and everything, France approves. It's a go-ahead. Our major ally and our major power that kind of betrayed us was like, we felt bad about it. Who cares? We are the French. Oui, ha ha. So they were going to be like, hey, yeah, we'll accept that. We kind of, Frenched you on this one. So they accepted that. They sponsored. Even the British and a lot of other states besides the Austrians actually supported this unification, this bigger entity that was starting to form. The foundations of a unified Italy, what we know today. All right. Now, here's the great part about this. Because Garibaldi sets forth that he had a few failures. We're not going to get too much into his life. It was really interesting as being one of the fathers of Italy, modern Italy. But he sets forth to Sicily, the kingdom of two Sicilies. Okay? He goes to Sicily to start this expedition of 1,000, it's called. Within 2 months, he conquers the island of Sicily. His numbers of his army grow substantial. The time he hits the mainland, he only started off with 1,000. And that's true. He only started off with 1,000. The time he leaves and conquers Sicily, he's got 50,000 troops going to mainland Italy. Going to the Italian boot. They jumped off the ball, going to the boot. Let's see if you get that reference. All right. So, or that comparison. So, it's amazing because they want to go. Now, here's where the French get a little involved because of the monarchy. What monarchy the French always went back and forth? The Bourbon monarchy, right? Well, Bourbon family and the Bourbon monarchy was established as king and head in the kingdom of the two Sicilies. They are gold to go and overthrow those guys. They do run and they flee. They're gone. Gone. Totally gone. Now, by this point, on March the 17th, 1861, it is declared the Kingdom of Italy under Victor II as king, as monarch of and the establishment of the Kingdom of Italy by this point. Okay? But here's where the kicker. What about the Papal States? Now this is why the French pulled out. Because one thing about Napoleon III you got to keep in mind with Napoleon III is he's a devoted Catholic, and the majority of French is Catholicism. He wanted to pull out because he didn't want to threaten the Papal States. All right? And the Pope, because he's the protector of the Pope. But he also had an agreement and a truce to grab those territories, which Sardinia does give to France. Right? He's juggling here. So he pulls out of the war. That's why he has a separate truce with Austria. Yeah, we're done. We're out. Now, this pleases the Pope and the papacy. But a lot of supporters, too, back in France, because there was a lot of social issues started to happen in France, and started to turn towards more of a republic. But a lot of the Catholics were like, what are you doing? No. We got to protect the Pope. We got to protect the Papal States. That is Catholic lands. That is our Jerusalem. All right? Our Holy Land within the world of Catholicism. No. Stop it. Get out of it before that even decides to happen. And this is exactly what they do. Okay? Now, Emanuel is, in March the 17th, 1861, becomes king of Italy. Turin becomes the provincial capital of Italy. It becomes the capital before Rome does. But here's the problem. Rome is still in the hands of the papacy. The papacy doesn't join us. All right? Now, most of Italy, the two Sicilies, finally joined because they're surrounded by Garibaldi. They're all put into it. So you have little pieces of Italy, modern-day Italy, still part of the Papal States. The Vatican. Right? So, this becomes very problematic. Italy's not whole yet. It is, and it's celebrated in 1861, but it's not complete. Rome is not a part of the Italian nation yet. It's still in the hands of the Pope. Alright? Now, this is the notorious question. Alright? Everybody wanted Rome, and everybody knew that Rome was truly the capital city of the Italian peninsula, the capital city of Italy. They realized that that was a dream, that was nationally, historically accurate to the max of that narrative. It's got to be Rome. Rome's not in Italy's hands. It's not in Victor Emmanuel II, the new founded king, on March the 17th, 1861. So, here is the dilemma. Here's the question. It's called the Roman question. Now, there's a lot of questions. There's the Polish question, the Far Eastern question, the Jewish question. All these questions. There's famous questions throughout history. The peasant question. I'm going to do a series on these notorious questions through history. This is the Roman question at this point. Now, the papacy states still controlled and held many lands around the city, all right, for the next 70 years. Pope and state, all right? It takes another 70 years to actually, roughly 70 years, before Italy's actually a kingdom entirely, right? It takes time, all right, during this entire episode, all right? So, you got to remember, my kitty, you got to remember that after the Second Italian War of Independence, the Italian unification is not fully complete. You still have places under Austrian rule in the north, remember? Vienna. Vienna, some people say. But anyway, I get off track. So, back to Rome, the Roman question, right? So, there's still got the papacy states, but there's this massive body, geographical positioning of an Italian state. But it's not the entire Italian state. Unification is not yet complete. It's still called the Kingdom of Italy, but it's not what we know as Italy yet. It's not fully in unification. That's going to take place later on. All right? Now, the thing is, at this point, Garibaldi takes those 50,000 men, and it's death or Rome. It's always death or something. Right? Death in Rome. This is a notorious march on Rome. It was a failed attempt. It wasn't like a huge military march on Rome, but it actually did take place. They were totally intercepted by the Royal Italian Army by this point, which was sponsored by the Pope and everything like this. And the French were still in and had garrisons within Rome and within the Papal States. Now, a famous battle took place where pretty much Garibaldi is defeated and was totally defeated. He only had 2,000 men with banners at the time on this famous notorious march. He was defeated by the Guard and by the Roman papacy, and at the battle of pretty much it's Aspirate. So, and by 1865. Florence becomes the new Italian capital. Now turn and move to Florence. The home and the roots and the origins of the Renaissance. Right? So it had very symbolic value that way. Now, here's the thing. This is the end of the Second Italian War of Unification. What about the third? Well, the beginning of the third is something else. Alright? So, we're not going to get back to that until the next episode. We're going to finish up the Italian unification. All right? So, give a little break. There's a lot to this one. So, we're going to stop there, and we're going to learn about the final stages of Italian unification. But right now, up to in this episode, I want you to remember a few key facts of nationalism and how it very played a role. Everybody's on board with nationalism and Italian unification. With the Italians, and with the Austrians. Now, with Sardinia, now actually the Kingdom of Italy, right, which on March the 17th, 1861, King Victor Emmanuel II becomes the king of the Kingdom of Italy. Now, France gets those two territories. That was rewarded. France is grateful, and they expand what those places still today are in modern-day France. But they're still fighting off the Austrians in one part of the region, even Venice, in that part, in pretty much the northeastern part, northern tip of, is under Austrian rule, because the Austrian Empire is like right there geographically. So Italy's not entirely, there's a lot of Italians that are living still at this point under Austrian domination and supremacy. But, and also within the heart, you got the meat. You got a sandwich on the go within Italy. It's the Italian sandwich. You got some bread up here, some bread down here, but in the middle you got that papacy meat. Alright? That meat of the papal states. Well, they wanted that meat, because you can't make a whole hamburger or a whole Italian hamburger without that meat in the middle, geographically speaking, right? So, and plus, that meat makes what a hamburger is a hamburger, right? Well, Rome was that. And the lands that the papacy states still owned, that was the final meat of that sandwich or that hamburger, Italian unification. But they are at this point more free from European dominance from foreign powers. But they still have the Austrians to contend within the north, and they got to deal around religiously. Now, religiously, Italians are very devoted Catholics, but this was more of a political feature, because the papal states should become part of Italy, because it was to be in Italy is to be Catholic. Okay, that's the religious aspects behind it. And with these regions, and this is the Italian unification, there's a lot of reasons too that show why Italy does what they do during the World War One. They were on the Axis, but then they went back to the Allies. Well, it all stems from all three wars of Italian independence and the goals and the things that actually happened during this time. So, what actually everything else actually starts to take place. But until the next episode, we will be finishing the Italian unification process after that. But until then, remember, learn a little bit of history, study it as a devotion. Alright? And if you can, when someone gets history wrong, correct them.